Sloane Hargrove threw her phone hard straight into her assistant's chest. "Find me a pilot in the next 10 minutes," she said, "or my father dies alone." A floor buffer clattered against the polished concrete. Every head in the hangar turned. The maintenance worker stood there, gray uniform, rubber-soled boots, the long handle of the machine still settling against the wall he'd propped it on. Water from the buffer pad dripped in a slow, patient circle at his feet. He looked at no one in particular. "I can fly it." Silence. Then the laughter came fast and unkind, rolling through the hangar like a wave. Sloane Hargrove walked toward him. Her heels struck the concrete with a rhythm that sounded like a decision being made. She stopped 3 feet away, looked him up and down the way someone examines a building before they decide whether to buy it. She smiled, cold, amused. "Fly this jet," she said, "and I'll marry you." What she didn't know, what no one in that hangar knew, was that this man had once been one of the most decorated test pilots in Air Force history. And the reason he had stopped flying would bring her to her knees. Comment the city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Subscribe and stay close. We're just getting started. Ethan Mercer had been buffing the same section of concrete for 31 minutes. He knew that because he counted. Counting kept the noise quiet. Counting kept the memories from getting enough traction to take hold. 31 minutes on one 16-foot square. The machine humming, his hands steady on the handle, his mind as close to blank as he'd learned to get. 9 months. That's how long he'd been at Pearland Executive Airstrip south of Houston, invisible among the aircraft and the money and the endless blue Texas sky. The place was a cathedral of quiet wealth. Private jets parked in climate-controlled bays. Ground crews moving with practiced efficiency. Men in tailored suits, walking past Ethan, like he was a piece of furniture someone had forgotten to move. Ethan had earned that invisibility. He'd worked for it the same way other men worked for promotions. His hands, the same hands that had once gripped the stick of experimental aircraft at speeds that made the airframe groan, now gripped the buffer handle worn smooth in the exact places where his palms rested. He knew every ridge, every worn patch. The machine didn't ask anything of him. That was the point. He heard Sloane Hargrove before he saw her. Rapid footsteps, the specific pitch of someone moving too fast for good news. And underneath that, 2 other sets of feet scrambling to keep pace. Ethan didn't look up. He'd learned long ago looking up invited questions, and questions invited the past. And the past was a country he'd renounced citizenship in 8 years ago. "What do you mean there's no one available?" The voice cut across the hangar like something sharp and precise. Not shouting, worse than shouting. Controlled fury. He'd seen Sloane Hargrove half a dozen times over his 9 months here. She was always in motion, always surrounded by people working furiously to stay relevant to her next thought. She had the quality of someone who made rooms smaller just by entering them, not cruelly exactly, but inevitably. Like weather. "Ma'am, I've called everyone on the roster." Her assistant's voice was tight, carefully professional. "Caldwell is on medical leave. Jensen's overseas until Thursday. Harris has a family emergency." "I don't care about Harris's family emergency. My father just had a stroke." A pause, and in it the sound of a woman holding herself together through sheer force of professional habit. "He's unconscious in a hospital in Denver. The doctors don't know if he'll make it through the night. And you're telling me there's no one who can fly me there?" "Ma'am, we're working on it. The earliest charter availability is. A commercial flight takes 3 hours with a connection. I need to get there now." Her voice cracked almost. Just almost. "So find me someone. I don't care what it costs. Find them." Ethan kept buffing. The machine hummed. His hands were steady. Then he heard a sound he hadn't anticipated. Small, involuntary. The sound Sloane made when she took the phone call. The change in her voice when she said, "Tell him I'm coming. Please tell him I'm coming." The way she lowered the phone and the professional armor fell off for just a second, just one visible human second, and underneath it was a daughter terrified of running out of time. Ethan's hands tightened on the handle. "Walk away. Keep your head down. Stay invisible." That was the sensible thing. The safe thing. The thing he'd spent 9 months rehearsing. But his mouth moved before his mind could vote on it. "I can fly it." He didn't recognize his own voice at first. It had been so long since he'd spoken more than the minimum. The silence that followed was absolute. Then it broke into laughter, bright, dismissive, the kind people produce when something surprises them and they don't know what else to do with it. Sloane turned slowly. Her two assistants turned with her. Ethan stood there, one hand on the buffer handle, water still dripping from the pad, wearing a gray Pearland maintenance uniform with his name stitched above the breast pocket. He hadn't shaved in 4 days. He was 43 years old, and he looked like exactly what he appeared to be. "I'm sorry." Sloane's voice had gone cold and controlled again. "What did you just say?" I said. "I can fly it." He nodded toward the hangar bay where the Falcon 8X sat, waiting white and silver and still. "That jet. I can fly it to Denver." One of the assistants, younger tablet in hand, let out a short, sharp laugh. "Oh my God, is he serious right now?" The other one covered her mouth. Her shoulders were already shaking. Sloane didn't laugh. She studied him with the same expression she probably used in boardrooms when someone proposed something she hadn't decided yet whether to dismiss or exploit. Then she walked toward him, deliberate, one step at a time. She stopped 3 feet away. "You're telling me," she said carefully, "that you can fly a $78 million aircraft?" "Yes, ma'am." "You?" She looked at his uniform, his boots, the buffer behind him. "The man who waxes my floors?" "Yes, ma'am." The assistants were laughing openly now. One of them had to turn away. The other leaned against the doorframe like her legs had stopped cooperating. "Victoria, you have to be. I mean, are we seriously enough?" Sloane didn't take her eyes off Ethan. "What's your name?" "Ethan Mercer." She said it back to herself slowly, tasting it. "And where exactly did you learn to fly?" "Ethan Mercer Air Force." The laughter stuttered. "Test Pilot Division." The laughter stopped. Sloane's expression didn't shift by much, but something behind her eyes moved like a door swinging open an inch. "Test pilot. 12 years. 12 years as a test pilot." She crossed her arms. "And now you're buffing floors in my hangar." It wasn't a question, but it asked one. Ethan didn't answer. There was no good answer. There was only the truth, and the truth was something he hadn't said aloud since the day his world ended. The assistant with the tablet stepped forward. "Ma'am, this is clearly," I said. "Enough." Sloane moved closer to Ethan, close enough that he could smell something expensive, something unsentimental about her. "Let me make sure I understand what's happening here. You're claiming to be a former Air Force test pilot, one of the most elite roles in military aviation, and you're currently working as a maintenance worker." "I'm not claiming anything. I'm telling you the truth. And why on earth should I believe you?" Ethan met her eyes, held them. "You shouldn't. You have no reason to. But your father is dying in a hospital 1,400 miles from here, and I'm the only pilot standing in front of you." Sloane's jaw tightened. The hangar had gone very quiet. Mechanics had stopped moving. Ground crew stood frozen in place watching. "How long since you've flown?" she asked. The question landed like a fist. 8 years. 8 years. She laughed, but there was no humor anywhere near it. 8 years since you've touched a cockpit, and you want to fly my jet. "I don't want to, ma'am. I'm offering to." That's a lot of confidence for a man holding a buffer handle. Confidence has nothing to do with it. Some things don't leave you. Flying is one of them. Sloane was quiet for a long moment. Somewhere in the hangar, an engine part hit the concrete. The sound echoed and faded. Then her expression changed. A smile came cold, precise, theatrical. "All right, Ethan Mercer. Let me make you an offer." The assistants leaned in. "Fly this jet to Denver. Put it on the ground without a scratch." She paused, let the air between them do the work. "And I'll marry you." The hangar erupted. Her assistants lost it completely, loud, helpless, the kind of laughter that doubles people over. One of them actually clapped. "Oh, Sloane, did you see his face? This is too much." They laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. Like Ethan was a joke someone had set up for them. Like the offer he'd made was entertainment for people who had everything. Ethan stood there, the buffer behind him, water still dripping at his feet. His face burned not from anger, though anger was part of it. From something deeper, the particular sting of offering something real and having it thrown back as a punchline. Sloane watched him. Her smile stayed cold. She was enjoying the power of it, the precision of the cruelty. Well, she tilted her head. Nothing to say. Ethan looked at her. Then at the assistant, still laughing. Then at the Falcon 8X, sitting on the tarmac, $78 million of precision engineering twin CFE engines range to carry them to Denver and back without stopping. He knew every specification. He'd studied this aircraft years ago during the period when he still actually believed that he would fly again someday. 8 years ago, he'd made a promise. To Danny, to Claire, to the man he'd been before the accident took everything. Never again. But promises made in grief don't account for moments like this one. Sloan waved her hand, dismissive final. Get back to work, Mr. Mercer. The floors won't buff themselves. She turned. The assistants fell in behind her, still laughing, the sound trailing off down the corridor. Ethan stood there. His knuckles were white on the handle. The jet sat on the tarmac, silver and patient. He set the buffer against the wall. He straightened his uniform, and he walked toward the jet. Hey, where's he? No one stopped him. They just watched as the maintenance worker crossed the hangar floor, climbed the air stairs of the Dassault Falcon 8X and disappeared inside. The cockpit was exactly as Ethan remembered. Not this specific aircraft, but this feeling. The leather seat, the digital displays arranged exactly where human hands needed them to be. The faint smell of aviation that lives at the intersection of fuel and metal and possibility. He'd forgotten he'd missed this smell. He didn't hesitate. He didn't let himself. Muscle memory doesn't care about grief. It doesn't care about promises made at gravesites. It lives in your hands and your blood, and the part of your brain that formed before fear had any real vocabulary. Master, switch on. Instruments lit up. Battery check nominal. Fuel pumps engaged. The jet came to life. Ethan ran the pre-flight checklist with the precision of someone who had done it 10,000 times. Hydraulics good. Avionics good. Flight controls responsive. Each system answered him cleanly, professionally, without drama. His hands were steady. That surprised him more than anything. The last time he'd sat in a cockpit, the last real time his hands had shaken so badly he couldn't grip the controls. The Air Force doctor had called it psychosomatic response. The review board had called it grounds for grounding. Ethan had called it the end. But here, now with the familiar weight of everything around him, something was different. Not healed, not whole, but recognizable. Footsteps on the air stairs. You're actually doing this. Sloan stood in the cockpit doorway. Her face had changed again. The mockery had drained away. In its place was something Ethan couldn't immediately name, something that looked almost like recalculation. Yes, ma'am. She didn't move. If you crash this aircraft, I won't crash it. $78 million. I understand. My father's company. My reputation. Ethan looked up at her. Your father is dying, ma'am. We can discuss liability when we land. Something flickered in her eyes. She opened her mouth, closed it, and without another word, she moved into the cabin. He heard the seatbelt click. Marcus turned back to the controls. He picked up the radio. 8 years. 8 years since he'd spoken to a tower. 8 years since he'd requested clearance and meant it. But his voice, when it came, was steady. Pearland ground. This is Falcon Hargrove, 1 requesting taxi clearance runway 17. A pause. Hargrove 1 taxi to runway 17 via Alpha. Wind 210 at 8. Altimeter 29902. Roger. Hargrove 1 Alpha to 17. Ethan released the parking brake. The jet rolled forward, slow at first, settling into its own weight, then faster. The runway stretched ahead, gray and flat, and honest the way runways always are. He pushed the throttles forward. The engines answered not like a machine answering, but like something alive responding to a hand it recognized. 80 knots. 100. 120. Ethan pulled back on the stick. The nose lifted. The wheels left the concrete, and for the first time in 8 years, Ethan Mercer was in the air. Houston fell away below them. The ship channel glittered in the midday light. The flat green sprawl of the Texas coast stretched in every direction, bleeding into the Gulf on one side and the vast indifferent plain on the other. Ethan leveled at 3,500 feet, trimmed the aircraft, and let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like the better part of a decade. His hands were still steady. Sloan's voice came from behind him, quieter now. A different frequency. How did you do that? Do what? The takeoff. It felt like we just floated. Like the ground let us go instead of us leaving it. Ethan didn't answer right away. He was too busy listening to the engines, feeling the Falcon respond to micro inputs, this live, attentive thing that weighed 30,000 pounds and could read his intentions through his fingertips. Where did you really learn to fly? Sloan asked. I told you. That wasn't a normal Air Force takeoff. I've been on enough flights to know the difference. He set the autopilot. Entered the waypoints for Denver. The jet adjusted course with quiet dignity. Experimental Aircraft Division, he said finally. We tested planes that weren't supposed to exist yet. Flew them past their structural limits, past their design envelopes, pushed every system until it told us what it was afraid of. That sounds like a good way to die. It was. It is. A pause. It's why I stopped. Sloan was quiet for a moment. My father was a pilot, she said. Did you know that? No, ma'am. Started the company with a used Cessna and a fuel contract no one else wanted. One plane and a dream, that's what he always says. Her voice caught on the present tense. Said, I don't know which one to use anymore. Ethan checked the altimeter. Steady. He sounds like a man who knows how to start from nothing. He is. He taught me everything, how to read a deal, how to spot a liar, how to know when a room has already made up its mind. A long pause. I haven't spoken to him in 4 years. The engines hummed. We had a fight about the company. He said I was too aggressive, that I'd turned his business into something he didn't recognize. I said he was too small in his thinking, too attached to the way things used to be. She laughed, and it was a sad sound. We're both stubborn enough to let 4 years go by without picking up the phone. 4 years is a long time. I know. And now he might die without me telling him that I understand. That everything I built was because I was always trying to make him proud. Her voice was down to almost nothing now. He might never know that. Ethan understood more than he could say. He understood the specific weight of words that had never been spoken. He understood what it felt like to have time simply run out. You'll get there, he said. We'll get there. She didn't respond. But in the small mirror above the instrument panel, he saw her turn toward the window, one hand pressed against the glass, and he let her have the silence. They flew through it together for a while. The Texas Panhandle passed below brown and flat and vast. Can I ask you something? Sloan's voice had steadied. Go ahead. Why are you actually working as a maintenance worker? He'd known this question was waiting for him. Had felt it the whole time he was walking toward the jet. It's complicated. We have time. Ethan stared at the horizon. The sky ahead was pure and open, the kind of blue that doesn't ask anything of you. I had a co-pilot, he said. Young kid, 24 years old. First cycle with the test division. His voice was even careful, clinical. His name was Lieutenant Danny Reyes. Sloan didn't speak, just listened. We were testing a new navigation and stability system at high altitude. Reduced oxygen environment. Pushing the airframe well beyond its standard envelope, that was the job. We were good at it. Ethan's hands tightened on the yoke. Something failed. The navigation system fed bad data to the flight controls. The aircraft went into a flat spin at 38,000 feet. He paused. I fought it for 9 minutes. Did everything the training said to do, everything the manuals said to do, everything I could invent in the moment. I got us down. But Danny didn't make it. The words sat between them, heavy as stone. The review board cleared me. Called it equipment failure. Offered me another assignment, another aircraft, another chance. A long breath. I couldn't do it. I couldn't get back in a cockpit without hearing him, without hearing the sound he made when the spin started, and he realized we weren't going to stop it easily. He called for his mother. Ethan stopped. Swallowed. 24 years old. Called for his mother. That wasn't your fault. Maybe not. But he's still dead and I'm still here. He watched the horizon. So I stopped flying. And then I lost my wife 2 years later, car accident, nothing dramatic, just a wet highway and bad timing, and after that the only thing that made any sense was to disappear somewhere quiet and raise our son. So I did. What's his name, your son? Caleb. 6 years old. Sloan was quiet for a long moment. What was Danny like, she asked finally. As a person. Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Talked too much. Showed everyone pictures of his fiancée on his phone. Same 3 photos, like we hadn't all memorized them. He had the engagement ring in his locker, was planning to propose when the deployment ended. A beat. Never got the chance. I'm sorry. So am I. The autopilot hummed. The aircraft was perfectly trimmed, holding its course with quiet precision. I took the maintenance job because it was invisible, because no one expected anything from me, because I could disappear into the work and not think about any of it. But you didn't disappear today. No. Why Ethan thought about the sound Sloane had made when she took that phone call. The way her face had changed. The way fear had come off her in waves that even a man who'd spent 9 months not looking at anyone could feel. "Because you needed help," he said. "And I could help." A long silence. "I was cruel to you," Sloane said quietly. "Back in the hangar, the things I said, you were scared. That's not an excuse." "No, but it's a reason. Fear makes people ugly sometimes." He checked the instruments. They were 30 minutes out from Denver. Mercer. It was the first time she'd used his last name like that, not dismissive, not professional. Something else. "We're starting the descent. 25 minutes to landing." The Rockies appeared ahead of them, enormous white-capped sudden. Denver's front range spread below the mountains, city and suburb, and the flat, endless grid of the American West. Ethan contacted Denver Approach, received clearance, lined up the approach to runway 34L. He'd done this 10,000 times. He'd done it in crosswinds and in ice and in darkness and in aircraft that were barely speaking to their pilots. But he'd never done it with this much on the line. His hands moved without trembling. Flaps to landing position. Gear down. Airspeed decreasing through 160 knots, 140-120. The runway rose toward them. The wheels touched with a sound like a whisper. The jet rolled smooth and true, decelerating without drama, coming to rest exactly where Ethan had intended. Perfect. He sat for a moment, hands still on the controls. Steady. Behind him, he heard Sloane let out a long, shaking breath. That she said quietly was the smoothest landing I've ever experienced. Ethan looked at his hands. The hands that had just put a $78 million aircraft down in Denver. The same hands that had mopped and buffed and scrubbed for 9 months. The same hands that had failed to save Danny Reyes. They looked the same. But something inside them had changed. For the first time in 8 years, Ethan Mercer felt like a pilot. The ground crew met them within minutes. Faces appeared at the terminal windows. Phones came out. Word had moved ahead of them somehow. The story already outrunning the plane. Ethan shut down the engines one by one. The instruments went dark. The hum faded into silence. He unbuckled and stood. His legs felt strange under him. Sloane appeared in the cockpit doorway. Her eyes were red, and her posture had changed straighter now, ready for whatever was waiting at the hospital. But something else was there too, in the way she looked at him. "My driver's meeting me outside," she said. "Will you be okay getting back? I'll figure it out." She nodded, started to turn, stopped. "Mercer." A pause. "What you did today." She shook her head slightly, like the words weren't organizing themselves right. "I don't know how to thank you." "Go see your father," he said. "That's enough." She held his eyes for one long moment. Then she was gone, heels on the air stairs, voice already on the phone, arranging the next 10 minutes of her life with the efficiency of someone who had learned that motion is its own kind of armor. Ethan stood alone in the cockpit. The leather seat still held the shape of him. The controls still felt warm. He'd done it. After 8 years of telling himself the door was closed and welded shut and buried, he'd done it. And instead of triumph, what he felt was the terrifying sensation of having opened something he wasn't sure he could close again. His phone buzzed. "Mrs. Tran." "Caleb asking when you're home." "Everything okay?" he typed back quickly. "Delayed. Home for dinner. Give him a hug for me." A Hargrove Company rep handed him a ticket at the terminal commercial back to Houston first class. "Miss Hargrove's instructions," the young man said. Ethan almost laughed. This morning he'd been buffing floors. Now he was flying home in first class. The irony was lost somewhere in the exhaustion. He ordered one drink on the flight home, stared at it, ordered a second one. The alcohol didn't quiet anything. If anything, it sharpened the memories, brought them up in high definition. Danny's voice, the alarms, the spin, Claire's face in the hospital waiting room. "You're alive. That's what matters. You're here." And the way he'd known even then that she was wrong to say it so simply because Danny wasn't and the universe hadn't, explained why the math had worked out the way it had. He landed at Hobby just after 7. Took a rideshare home through streets still hot from the day. Mrs. Tran was waiting at his door. She was 68 years old, gray hair pinned back with the same 2 clips she always used, eyes that cataloged everything they passed over. "You look different," she said. "Long day." She picked up her bag. Caleb ate his dinner, did his reading. "He's in his room." She paused at the threshold. He asked me today if you ever flew airplanes. Ethan's throat closed. What did you tell him I told him to ask you? She patted his arm once firmly. Some questions only a father can answer. She left. Caleb's door was open, a crack light spilling into the hallway. Ethan pushed it gently. His son was sitting on his bed, a picture book in his lap, dark hair going in 6 directions, wearing the dinosaur pajamas he'd refused to outgrow. When he saw Ethan, something in his whole face opened up like a window being raised. "Dad," he launched himself off the bed. Ethan caught him, held him tight, breathed in soap and peanut butter and childhood and the specific scent of this particular small person who was the only reason any of this mattered. "You're late," Caleb said into his shoulder. "I know. I'm sorry. Where were you?" Ethan carried him to the bed, sat down with his son in his lap. His boy's weight, solid, warm, entirely trusting, was the most real thing in the world. "I had to do something at work. Something important." What Ethan hesitated. He'd spent 3 years carefully protecting Caleb from the complicated truth of who his father used to be. The past felt like a country that had nothing to offer his son, only the damage it had done. But Mrs. Tran's words were still in the room. Some questions only a father can answer. "I flew an airplane today." Caleb went absolutely still. Then, a real one. A big jet. Was it scary? Ethan thought about the moment the wheels left the ground. The way Houston fell away. The way his hands had felt. A little. "Yeah, but you did it anyway. I did it anyway." Caleb considered this with the full gravity of a 6-year-old processing something important. "Mom said you used to fly airplanes," he said. "Before." Ethan's chest clenched. "She told you that. She said you were the best pilot in the whole world. She said you could fly anything." Even gone, Claire was still in the room, still shaping her son, still leaving truth behind her like breadcrumbs. "I used to fly," Ethan said carefully. "A long time ago. Then I stopped." Why? The question hung there, small and impossible. "Something bad happened, and I got scared." Caleb nodded. Slowly, seriously. "I get scared too. At school, when something's hard and I think I'm going to mess it up. What do you do when that happens?" Caleb looked at him with Claire's eyes. Claire's exact eyes, the particular brown that was warm and unhurried, and saw things directly. "I remember what Mom said." Ethan waited. "She said being brave doesn't mean you're not scared. It means you do it anyway." The apartment was very quiet. Ethan's throat was closed. His eyes were burning. Claire's words in their son's voice, crossing 3 years of absence to find him in this exact moment. He couldn't speak. "Your mom," he managed finally, "was the smartest person I ever knew." "I know." Caleb yawned. "Dad, yeah, buddy. If you fly airplanes again, can I come watch?" Ethan pulled him closer. "We'll see. That means maybe. That means maybe. I think you should do it. Already half asleep. Mom would want you to." He was out within minutes. Ethan sat there with his sleeping son, the small, warm weight of him, the steady rise and fall of his chest. Mom would want you to. Would she? Would Claire want him in the sky again, where something could go wrong, where the math could work out the wrong way again, and leave Caleb with nothing? He thought about the woman he'd married 10 years ago. The music teacher who dragged him back from the edge after Danny died, made him eat, made him sleep, made him talk, even when talking felt like surgery without anesthesia. The woman who'd told him once, her hand on his chest, "You'll fly again someday, when you're ready. When you remember, you were made for it." 3 years after that, she was gone. And now her son was delivering her message from beyond everything with perfect timing. Ethan laid Caleb down. In the Sentels and Doler reason son was Ludders remenders, and the Storig resentals and dolers reason sunders, and remenders reasons and dolers. Tucked the blanket, stood in the doorway watching his son breathe. He walked to the kitchen window and stood there, a long time. Houston glittered below. Planes crossed overhead, red lights blinking patient patterns against the dark. He'd made his choice 3 years ago, standing at Claire's grave with a 3-year-old in his arms. No more risks, no more sky, just survival. But tonight had cracked something, and he didn't know how to seal the crack or whether he should. The next morning, Ethan put on his gray uniform and went back to work. But the hangar was different now. Not the space itself, that hadn't changed, but the way people moved through it. Mechanics nodded at him. Ground crew made eye contact for the first time in 9 months. Ray Kowalski, the lead mechanic, stopped him at the tool crib. "Hell of a thing you did yesterday, Mercer. Just flew a jet. Just flew A-OK." Ray grinned. "You need coffee, man." Around 11, Sloane's assistant appeared, the younger one who'd laughed the hardest in the hangar. "Mr. Mercer." She couldn't hold his eyes. "Miss Hargrove would like to see you." Her office. "I'm working." She said to come now. Ethan set down his equipment and followed her across the hangar, up the stairs, past the glass walls, into the space that overlooked the entire runway. Sloane was standing at the window, her back to him. "Close the door," she said. He did. "My father is stable." She didn't turn around. "The doctors say he'll recover. Full recovery potentially if the rehab goes well." A pause. "I sat with him all night. He woke up around 4 in the morning. First thing he said was, 'My name.' Ethan said nothing. I told him I was sorry. For all of it. For the years we wasted being right at each other." She turned. She looked like a woman who had been awake for 24 hours and didn't care. There was something in her face that hadn't been there before, not softness exactly, but openness. "He said he already knew. He said he'd been waiting for me to find my way back. That sounds like a man who loves his daughter. Stubborn old man." She almost smiled. She walked to her desk, picked up an envelope. "I had someone pull your service record last night." Her voice was careful. "I needed to understand what happened yesterday." Ethan's shoulders tightened. "You had no right to do that." "I know. I'm sorry." She opened a folder. "Captain Ethan Mercer, 12 years Air Force, Test Pilot Division, 2 overseas deployments, Medal of Valor for actions in undisclosed theater, commendation from the Joint Chiefs for..." She looked up. "You were one of the best combat test pilots in the country. That was a long time ago. 8 years isn't that long." She closed the folder. "I also found the incident report. Danny Reyes. And I found out about your wife." Ethan's jaw locked. "That's private." "I know. And I'm sorry for your losses, both of them." She held out the envelope. "This is for you." "What is it?" "A contract. Senior pilot, Hargrove Aviation. Full benefits, 6-figure salary, flexible schedule designed around your son's school year." Ethan didn't take it. "I'm not a pilot anymore. You flew my jet to Denver yesterday after 8 years on the ground. Perfectly. That isn't something that simply leaves a person." She stepped closer. "I know what it looks like when someone gives up on themselves, Mercer. I watched my father do it after my mother died. He disappeared into work so completely that by the time I was 12, I'd stopped expecting him to actually be present. And then I turned into him. Built the company, forgot to build a life." Her voice was quiet but certain. "You're not a janitor. And hiding here isn't protecting your son. It's modeling disappearance for him. I'm protecting the only person I have left. Are you protecting him, or are you protecting yourself from the risk of loving something you might lose?" The words hit harder than they had any right to. Ethan took a step back. "Miss Hargrove, you spent 9 months invisible in my hangar. Buffing floors, cleaning bathrooms, talking to no one, pretending to be something you're not." Her voice was still quiet. "I mocked you for it yesterday, because I couldn't see past the uniform. But I see you now. And you're not a maintenance worker. So, what is it you're actually afraid of?" "I told you. I have a son. Children don't need perfect parents." She shook her head. "They need real ones. They need parents who show them that falling down isn't the end. That getting back up is something you choose." She picked up the envelope again and held it out. "Don't let fear take the rest of your life. You've already given it 8 years." Ethan stared at the envelope. Something was building in his chest, pressure, heat. The specific sensation of something locked, trying to force its way out through walls that weren't as strong as he'd believed. "I can't." "Yes, you can. You don't understand." "Then help me understand." "I killed someone." The words came out of him like something that had been held underwater for too long. Raw, tearing factual. "Danny Reyes trusted me to bring him home. He was 24 years old and he trusted me, and I sat in that cockpit while his aircraft spun into the ground and I could not fix it. I tried for 9 minutes and I could not fix it. And he died, scared he died, calling for his mother, and I came home." His voice cracked. "The board cleared me. Equipment failure, nothing I could have done. They handed me another assignment like it was a apology. But I can see his face every time I close my eyes. I can hear his voice. And then 2 years later, Claire, my wife, the only reason I was still functioning, she was on her way home from school in the rain, and a truck ran a red light and she was gone. Gone. Just like that. Without warning. Without even a goodbye. He was crying. He didn't care. So don't tell me about fear. Don't tell me about running. I'm not running. I'm standing between the only person I have left and everything that could take him from me. The office was completely silent. Sloane crossed the room slowly, stood in front of him. Mercer. Her voice was very soft. He couldn't look at her. What happened to Danny wasn't your fault. Equipment failure. 9 minutes of fighting to save him. Nothing you could have done. She paused. You don't believe the report. It doesn't matter what I believe. He's still dead. What would Claire say? Sloane asked quietly if she were here right now. Don't. What would she tell you to do? I said, don't. Would she want you to spend the rest of your life disappearing? She'd want Caleb to be safe. She'd want both of you to be happy. Sloane's voice was certain in a way that surprised him. I can hear how much you loved her in the way you talk about her. A woman who loves like that doesn't want her husband to vanish. She wants him to live. Really live. Ethan closed his eyes. Claire's face. Her voice. Do the scary thing, Mercer. That's always been your move. Sloane pressed the envelope into his hands. Take it home. Think about it. Talk to Caleb. Then decide. He stood there, envelope in hand, tears drying on his face. Take all the time you need, she said, but take it. He turned and walked to the door, stopped with his hand on the frame. Miss Hargrove. Sloane. He looked back. Thank you for getting me to Denver. And for whatever this is. He paused. Just thank you. She nodded. Thank me by not giving up. That night, after Caleb was asleep, Ethan sat at the kitchen table for a long time. The envelope in front of him. Unopened. He made coffee, stared at it, made more coffee. Then he opened it. The contract was 4 pages. He read every word twice. Senior pilot, Hargrove Aviation. A salary that made his eyes water. Health insurance that would cover everything. Life insurance with Caleb as beneficiary enough to matter. A schedule with guaranteed ground days. Flexibility written in explicitly. It was everything he'd stopped letting himself imagine, and it was terrifying in the way that only real things are. He set the papers down and walked to the window. Planes moved across the Houston sky, blinking patient red. He went to bed, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, the cockpit came back, not the crash this time, but today's flight. The Rockies ahead. The Falcon steady in his hands. The way the aircraft had responded like it recognized him. Around 3 in the morning, he gave up on sleep and sat on the edge of his bed and did something he hadn't done since Claire's funeral. He talked to her. Not out loud exactly. Just toward her. Toward wherever she was. Tell me what to do. I don't know what to do. The apartment was quiet. No answer came. But just before dawn, he fell asleep. And he dreamed of flying, not the crash, not the alarms, not Danny, just flying. Smooth and clean through clouds that parted like curtains into a blue that went on forever. He woke with tears on his face and something strange in his chest. Something that felt cautiously like the beginning of hope. The next morning, Ethan made breakfast. Eggs, toast, Caleb's specific preference, since he'd turned 4 and decided it was the only acceptable option. The contract sat on the counter. Visible. Caleb climbed onto his chair in his dinosaur pajamas, hair in 4 different directions, eyes still sleepy. Dad. Yeah, buddy. What's that? He pointed at the papers. Ethan sat down across from him. He'd planned to wait to think it through more, to find the right words to protect his son from the weight of it. But Caleb was looking at him with Claire's eyes. And the right words didn't seem like the point. It's a job offer, Ethan said. Someone wants me to be a pilot again. Caleb's eyes went wide and stayed there. Like a real pilot, in the sky. Like a real pilot. Are you going to do it? I don't know yet. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. Caleb looked confused. Me? Why me? Because if I take this job, things would change. I'd have to travel sometimes. Be away from home some nights. And you'd be the first person I talked to about it before deciding. Caleb was quiet. His small face did the thing Claire's face used to do when she was really thinking, a slight scrunch around the eyes, lips pressed together. Would you come home, always? Promise, promise. Caleb nodded, pushed his eggs around the plate. Then he said, Mom told me you'd fly again someday. Ethan's hands went still. She said you were sad because something really bad happened. But she said one day you'd remember that you belong in the sky. Caleb ate a bite of toast. She said when that day came I should be brave, because you'd need me to be. Sarah, Claire, across 3 years, still here. When did she tell you this? Ethan's voice was barely a sound. Before she went to heaven, she made me promise to remember. Caleb looked up. I remember everything she said, Dad. I keep it all. Ethan reached across the table and took his son's hand. Are you scared? Caleb asked. Yeah, that's okay. Mom said being scared is normal. A pause. She said the brave thing is doing it anyway. Ethan closed his eyes. The tears came before he could manage them. Dad, are you crying? Yeah, buddy. Because you miss Mom. Partly. He squeezed his son's hand. And partly because I'm so proud of you, I don't have words for it. Caleb smiled. That smile that was entirely, completely Claire. So are you going to do it, be a pilot again? Ethan looked at his son, at the contract on the counter, at the photo of Claire on the refrigerator, summer light, laughing at something off camera entirely herself. Yeah, he said. I think I am. Caleb launched himself off the chair. Training started the following Monday. 12-hour days in the simulator. Emergency procedures until the sequences lived in his hands before his brain finished forming the thought. Navigation systems, weather scenarios, mechanical failures, electrical faults, every condition designed to find the edges of him and push past them. Sloan brought in Ray Kowalski as lead technical instructor, which surprised Ethan. He'd known Ray only as the mechanic who kept the Falcon in perfect condition. But Ray had spent 8 years flying EA. 1-8S off carriers before a shoulder injury grounded him, and he ran the retraining program with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd made peace with his own loss. Ethan failed constantly at first. His timing was off. His responses were half a beat slow. His hands gripped the controls too hard. You're fighting the aircraft, Ray told him after a particularly bad session. You're flying like it might betray you. It might. So might a car. So might a staircase. Ray handed him coffee. You trust the machines you can't control. You've just stopped trusting the ones you can. I froze once. In a real emergency. My co-pilot died. I read the report. Ray sat down. The equipment failed Mercer. Not you. I was the pilot in command. It happened on my watch. That's not the same as causing it. Ethan stared into his coffee. Fear is survivable, Ray said. Hesitation will get you and everyone around you killed. Fear is sharp. Fear is information. The problem is you've confused the two. He stood up. Get back in the sim. Run it again. And this time, don't manage the aircraft. Fly it. Ethan went back. Failed again. Ran it again. And somewhere around the 11th attempt, something shifted. He stopped treating the controls like a problem to be solved and started treating them like a conversation. The responses came from somewhere below conscious thought, from the place where 12 years of muscle memory had been waiting, patient and quiet for him to stop arguing with it. By the end of the second week, his hands had stopped shaking. By the end of the third, he was passing scenarios he'd failed a dozen times before. By the end of the fourth, Ray came and stood beside him after a session and said simply, "You're back." Sloan had started coming to watch the training sessions. She stood on the observation deck above the simulator bay in the evenings, professional quiet, separate from the team dynamic, like a silent guarantor. One evening, she came down after the staff had left. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Tired. Older than I've ever felt. Genuinely concerned about my lower back." She laughed. It surprised them both. It was a real laugh, unguarded, and it changed her face into something completely different. "Caleb asked about you," Ethan said. "Did he? Wanted to know if you were the lady who gave me the job?" I said yes. He said I should thank you, and then he asked if you liked dinosaurs. Tell him yes. Especially the flying ones. Pterosaurs weren't dinosaurs. They were pterosaurs. Caleb will be very specific about this. Are you seriously correcting my paleontology right now, Caleb Wood? I'm just preparing you. She smiled again. They stood there in the quiet of the emptied hangar, and something had shifted between them. Over the past weeks, the chill was gone, the mockery was gone, and in its place was something Ethan didn't have a name for yet. Something he wasn't ready to name. Your certification is Friday, Sloan said. I know. Full technical team will be watching. Standard protocol. She touched his arm briefly, like something she'd decided to do before she could think better of it. Whatever happens, I'm glad you said yes. She walked away before he could answer. Friday came. Ethan woke at 5. Couldn't eat. Did push-ups until his arms gave out, trying to burn through the nervous energy. Caleb was still asleep when Mrs. Tran arrived. Big day, she said. Yeah. You'll do fine, she smiled. Claire used to tell me you'd find your way back. Every time she talked about you, every time she said it. He'll remember who he is. I know he will. She put her palm against his cheek. Go be the pilot she believed in. At the airstrip, they'd assembled early. Engineers, mechanics, the full training staff. Sloan stood with them, composed, exact, a person made of discipline. Ethan entered the simulator bay. The scenario ran standard for the first 4 minutes, normal takeoff routine climb systems responding cleanly. He felt his own breathing steady. Then the first warning, hydraulic pressure drop. He responded without thinking, backup systems, control adjustments, problem contained. An electrical fault. Half the instruments went dark. He switched to manual, held altitude by feel, maintained heading by compass. Manageable. And then everything broke at once. Fire warning, both engines simultaneously. The cockpit filled with sound alarms on top of alarms, red lights strobing the specific mechanical scream that meant the aircraft was telling him it was dying. That sound. That exact sound. Ethan's hands froze. No. No, no, no. The altimeter was dropping. 4000 feet. 3500. Captain Mercer. The instructor's voice distant underwater. Respond to the emergency. But Ethan was somewhere else. He was at 38000 feet, and the aircraft was spinning, and Danny was beside him, and the spin was getting tighter, and there was nothing. What do we do? What do we do? Danny's voice. 24 years old. The last thing. 3000 feet. 2500. And then through the roar of every alarm, a small voice, calm and certain. You're the best pilot, Dad. You're the best one. Caleb. And under that another voice, warm, unhurried. The voice of a woman who had never stopped telling him the truth. You were made for this, Mercer. When you're ready. Claire. Ethan's hands moved. Both engines cut. Fire suppression activated. Trim for best glide ratio set. He found the simulated clearing below, lined up the approach. No power. Now just physics. Just lift and drag and angle. And the 30 years of his body, knowing how to do this, even when his mind had forgotten. 300 feet. The wheels hit hard. The simulator shook again, and stopped. Silence. Ethan sat there, chest heaving, controls still in his hands. The instructor's voice came through the headset, different now. Changed. Shut down complete. Emergency landing successful. Ethan pulled off the headset and climbed out. His legs were shaking so badly he braced against the sim frame. The observation room door opened. Sloan came through first, then Ray. Then the engineers, then the full training staff. They were all staring at him. Ray started clapping. One pair of hands, then two, then 10, then everyone in the bay, applause filling the space, bouncing off the walls and the ceiling. Ethan stood there, confused, overwhelmed. Sloan reached him. Her eyes were wet. She didn't try to fix that. That was a level 5 scenario, she said quietly. The hardest test we run. Most pilots fail it the first time. Some never pass it. You didn't tell me. You weren't supposed to know. She took his hand, held it briefly, firmly. You passed, Mercer. Perfectly. The door opened again. Mrs. Tran came through, and beside her, barely able to contain himself, Dad Caleb sprinted across the floor, and Ethan caught him, swept him up, held him so tight his arms shook. Everyone was clapping, Caleb announced to the room. That was for my dad. People laughed. The applause got louder. Sloan stepped forward and showed Ethan her phone. This came yesterday. I was waiting until after the test. He read the subject line. Singapore Air Show demonstration, pilot invitation. His hands went cold. They saw your training footage, Sloan said. The scenarios Ray has been running, they want a precision demonstration for the closing ceremony. Corporate clients, military observers, press from 43 countries. Ethan looked up. Why are you showing me this? Because there's more. She scrolled down. Meridian Aerospace is the lead sponsor. If the demonstration is successful, they're offering a full educational fund through university for the demonstration pilot's family. The room was very quiet. What Ethan's voice wasn't working correctly. Full scholarship. Any school Caleb chooses. Everything covered. Caleb tugged his sleeve. Dad, what's a scholarship? Ethan knelt down. Eye level with his son. It means his voice broke, then held. It means you could go to any school you want, any college. Everything paid for. Because you're flying, because I fly. Caleb's face went full sun. Claire's smile complete and unguarded. Then you have to, Dad. You have to do it. Ethan looked at Sloan. When 4 weeks from today, he looked at his son. At the contract he'd signed. At the test he'd just passed. At everything that had seemed completely impossible 9 months ago. I'll do it, he said. The 4 weeks that followed were the most demanding of Ethan's life. Sloan brought in General Frank Dade, retired 65 years old, with silver hair and eyes that processed everything without expression. He'd run the Blue Angels training program for 9 years. He didn't speak in encouragement. He spoke in exactness. You have skills, Dade said after their first session. Skills are not enough for Singapore. You need precision so deep it feels like breathing. You need showmanship. You need 80,000 people to hold their breath. How? By forgetting that flying is about survival. Out there, flying is about truth. Every maneuver has to mean something. Every line you trace in the sky has to feel inevitable. It was a different kind of work, not emergency response, but choreography. Every degree of every turn calculated in advance. Every climb timed to the second. Every recovery designed to look impossible while being completely controlled. You're flying scared, Dade told him after a failed barrel roll, his third attempt. I can see it from here. I'm being precise. You're being careful. Careful is for transport pilots. You are not flying cargo to Cincinnati. Dade sat down across from him. Why did you agree to this? For Caleb. Good reason. Not sufficient. He leaned forward. Why really? Ethan thought about the simulator, about Caleb's voice through the alarms, about the way Claire's words had found him at 2500 feet when everything else had failed. Because I think I've been waiting for permission, he said finally, to be who I was, and someone finally gave it to me. That's closer. Dade stood up. But here's what I need from you. I need you to take every piece of grief and loss and guilt you've been carrying, and instead of setting it down, I need you to put it in the aircraft. Fly with all of it. Let it fuel you instead of freeze you. How? The same way you got your hands moving in that simulator. You stop managing and you start flying. He turned to the door. Again. From the top. Ethan went back up. Failed again. Went back up again. And somewhere around the 12th attempt, something let go. He stopped thinking about the maneuvers and started feeling them. Stopped calculating and started inhabiting. The barrel roll came out perfect. The vertical climb hit its apex exactly where it was supposed to. The recovery was so clean that even Dade, watching from the ground, allowed himself a brief nod. Better, he said. Much better. By the end of week 2, Ethan was hitting 93% of his marks. Week 3 brought him to 97. At the end of week 4, Dade shook his hand and said, I've trained better pilots. Ethan waited. But I've never trained a braver one. The Singapore flight was 14 hours. Sloan had arranged everything, first-class hotel, transport, the works. Caleb came bouncing off the walls of the departure lounge within 5 minutes of arriving. Mrs. Tran came too, Sloan had insisted, saying the boy should see this. On the aircraft, somewhere over the Pacific, Sloan sat down in the empty seat beside Ethan. You should sleep. Can't. Terrified categorically. She was quiet for a moment. You know what I was doing 4 months ago, running a national company. I was mocking a maintenance worker in my hangar, and I was so convinced I was in the right. She shook her head. I think about that day a lot. The things I said. You already apologized. Apologizing doesn't erase it. It just acknowledges it. She looked at him. I was cruel, Mercer. I want to say it plainly. Fear took me somewhere ugly that day. We all do ugly things when we're scared. The measure is what comes after. She was quiet. My father is coming to Singapore, she said. What he called me yesterday. Said he wanted to see the pilot who flew his daughter to him. She smiled, and it was a real smile, complicated, layered. We've talked every day since the hospital. Actually talked. For the first time in 4 years, we're not pretending the space between us doesn't exist. That's everything. It's terrifying and wonderful, and I don't know how to sit inside it yet. Maybe you don't have to know. Maybe you just show up. She looked at him. A long, direct look. When did you get like this? Like what? Like someone who knows things? I'm 43, and I've lost people. You accumulate some things, whether you want to or not. She reached across and took his hand. Briefly. Warm. Then she stood up. Sleep, Captain Mercer. You have a world to impress tomorrow. Singapore was overwhelming in the way that only real things are. The heat off the tarmac. The Changi Exhibition Center spread over what felt like an entire city block, aircraft everywhere, fighters and transports, and experimental designs from 40 countries. Thousands of people moving through the exhibits, speaking every language. Simultaneously, the demonstration was scheduled for the final day. Sunset slot. The closing ceremony. The day before, Ethan walked the grounds alone. He needed to find some quiet in the noise, some still center before tomorrow. He found himself standing in front of a memorial installation, a long curved wall, photographs and names, pilots who died in service. Names and dates and brief inscriptions. One photograph stopped him cold. Young, dark eyes. A grin that suggested he'd just said something that made the whole room laugh. Lieutenant Daniel Reyes, USAF Test Pilot Division, 1,992,014. Pioneer in aviation safety systems development. Ethan's knees wanted to go. He'd avoided anything connected to Danny's death for 8 years. Any article, any memorial, any mention of the accident. He'd sealed it and locked it and put it somewhere he didn't visit. But here Danny was, smiling from a wall in Singapore. Forever 24. They honored him. Sloane behind him. He hadn't heard her approach. How long have you been there? Long enough. She moved to stand beside him. The Air Force submitted his name 3 years ago. He's recognized here as a key figure in the series of system failures that led to major safety reforms. The failure that killed him, it led directly to systems that have protected hundreds of pilots since. That doesn't bring him back. No, but it gives his death a shape, a meaning. Ethan reached out, touched the edge of Danny's photograph. He was going to propose when he got back. He had the ring in his locker. Showed it to everyone, same photo of the ring over and over, like we might forget what it looked like. His voice was breaking and he let it. I never contacted her. His fiancée. I never contacted his family. I didn't know how to face them. You're facing them now, Sloane said. Through this. She put her hand on his shoulder. Fly tomorrow for him, she said. Show the world what the two of you were working toward. I think he'd want that. Ethan looked at Danny's face. Young eyes. That grin. Yeah, he said quietly. I think he would. The morning of the demonstration, Ethan stood at the window of his hotel room watching the sun rise over the South China Sea. Caleb found him there an hour later. Dad, are you okay? Just nervous, buddy. Caleb climbed onto the chair beside him. I had a dream about Mom last night, he said. Ethan's chest tightened. Yeah, she was smiling. She said she was proud of you. Caleb leaned against him. That, she said today, was going to be something really special. Ethan pulled his son close and didn't say anything. She's always right, Caleb said. Even from heaven. At the demonstration grounds, 80,000 people had gathered. The bleachers were full. The VIP section held military officials, aerospace executives, and press from 43 countries. The sunset was 40 minutes out the sky, already beginning its transformation above the strait. Ethan stood beside the Falcon white and silver Hargrove Aviation on the tail as Ray ran the final checks. She's perfect, Ray said. Everything's perfect. Ready when you are. Sloane appeared with her father. Warren Hargrove was 68 years old, weathered in the way of men who've spent their lives working in weather, white hair, a face that had earned every line on it, eyes that held something Ethan recognized immediately as the particular gravity of someone who has been close to death recently and is paying attention now. So you're the pilot who saved my daughter's life, Warren said. I flew the jet, sir. You did a great deal more than that. Warren extended his hand. I've been briefed extensively. My friend still in aviation can't stop talking about you. Ethan shook his hand. I hope it was mostly good. The only bad part was learning you spent 9 months cleaning floors instead of flying. But Warren smiled. Sometimes we need to disappear before we can remember who we are. I spent 3 years on a charter fishing boat in Alaska after my wife died. Didn't touch an aircraft the whole time. Some losses take longer. The important thing is that you come back. Warren clapped his shoulder. Make us proud out there, Captain. Mrs. Tran appeared with Caleb, who was vibrating at a frequency that suggested he hadn't slept at all. Ethan knelt down. Whatever happens up there, he said, I need you to know something. What? You're the reason I'm doing this. You and your mom. Every good thing in my life, it's because of you two. Caleb threw his arms around Ethan's neck and held on with everything he had. I love you, Dad. I love you, buddy. More than I know how to say. Caleb pulled back, eyes shining, completely certain. I told you you're the best. Ethan stood up, looked at Sloan, at Warren, at Ray, at Mrs. Tran. All of them there, all of them believing. Time to go, he said. He climbed the air stairs, settled into the cockpit, the familiar embrace of the seat, the familiar smell, the familiar weight of the controls in his hands. This was where he was supposed to be. This was who he was. He opened his maintenance locker, the one he'd brought with him to the airstrip, the one that came with him everywhere he went. He took out the leather flight logbook. Spine split, cover worn soft. The writing surface for 9 months of maintenance checklists in pencil. He opened it. For the first time in 8 years, the pages were dense with flights, dates and coordinates and altitudes and conditions and the specific shorthand of 2 pilots who understood each other. His handwriting and Danny's alternating, back and forth, the way it worked in the test division. The last entry was in Danny's hand. March 14, high-altitude stability test. Conditions, excellent. Co-pilot Mercer at peak form showing off as usual. Lucky to fly with this guy. Ethan closed his eyes. He closed the logbook, set it on the seat beside him. Ready when you are, Danny, he said quietly. The radio crackled. Hargrove 1, you are cleared for demonstration. Runway is yours. Ethan exhaled. Roger, control. Hargrove 1, beginning demonstration. He pushed the throttles forward. The engines answered, not like a machine, but like something that had been waiting. The Falcon rolled faster, faster, and then the wheels released the ground and the sky accepted him. And 80,000 faces became a blur below. And the Singapore Strait caught the last of the day's light and turned it into something extraordinary. Ethan flew. Every maneuver Dade had drilled into him. Every precision sequence, every timed input, every degree and angle and altitude, it all came together not as a performance, but as a conversation between a pilot and the sky above a city that didn't know his name and was learning it. Anyway, barrel rolls that looked effortless, a vertical climb that seemed to pull the aircraft toward the stars, a dive that brought him screaming toward the strait, pulling level 20 feet above the water, close enough to see his own reflection, and the crowd noise came through the sealed cockpit like weather. He flew figure eights in the sunset. He traced spirals that left vapor lines hanging in the gold and pink and blue. He flew the aircraft to its limits and pulled it back, always in control, always precise, always present, not managing, not surviving, but flying. 22 minutes. The final sequence, a slow roll. Directly overhead, wings vertical, then inverted, then back to level. The sun catching the silver fuselage as the aircraft hung between states. And for one suspended moment, it looked like Ethan Mercer was flying, through fire. He lined up for landing, descended smooth and steady. The wheels found the runway softly, softly, a whisper. The jet rolled to a stop. Silence. Then the world came apart with sound. 80,000 people on their feet. Ethan sat in the cockpit engines cooling around him and let himself feel it. He climbed out, stood on the wing. The crowd stretched before him, a sea of faces all aimed at one person. Movement at the barrier, small, fast, absolutely determined. Caleb broke through the security line, sprinting across the tarmac, leaving Mrs. Tran somewhere behind him. Ethan jumped down from the wing just in time. Dad. Caleb hit him like weather, arms locked around his neck, face buried in his shoulder. That was you up there, that was me, buddy. I saw you, I saw everything. Sloan reached them next. She didn't try to compose herself. Tears were running, and she let them. You did it, she said. Mercer. My God, you actually did it. He couldn't speak. He held his son with one arm and pulled Sloan in with the other, and they stood there in the noise and the light and the last of the Singapore sunset. Warren Hargrove appeared. His eyes were wet too. 40 years in aviation, he said quietly. That was the most beautiful flying I've ever seen. Later that night, after the press and the sponsors and the ceremony and the dinner where Ethan's name was said too many times to count, he stood on the hotel balcony. Sloan found him there. She stood beside him. Singapore stretched below a city of extraordinary light against a dark that couldn't quite keep up with it. My father asked me something tonight, she said. What? He asked if I was happy. Ethan looked at her. What did you say? I said, I'm getting there. She met his eyes. Thanks to you. I didn't. You did everything. She stepped closer, measured, certain. 4 months ago, I was a CEO who'd built an empire and lost track of why. I'd made money the center of everything and pushed away everyone who mattered. I was successful and alone and convinced those two things weren't connected. And now I have my father back. I have something to build toward that has nothing to do with market share. She paused. And I have, she stopped. What you? Barely a whisper. Is that too fast? Is this? Tell me if this is too fast. Ethan thought about Claire. About the years they'd had together. About the years that had ended too soon. Nothing's too fast, he said. Life's too short to wait for the moment to feel perfectly settled. Sloan smiled. That smile that had started cold and become something else entirely, over 4 months of proving itself. What happens now? Now we go home. I keep flying. You keep running your empire. Caleb starts 2nd grade. We figure out the rest in motion. That's not a plan. Every plan I ever made carefully fell apart. Maybe going without one is better. She laughed and leaned against him, and they stood together watching the lights until the stars came out and a plane lifted off from Changi red lights, climbing into the dark, carrying someone somewhere they needed to be. Caleb asked me something today, Sloan said. What he asked if I'd be around for a while. Ethan looked at her. What did you say? I said, I hope so. If that was okay with his dad. He put his arm around her. It's okay with his dad. They flew home 3 days later. Caleb slept against Ethan's shoulder for most of the Pacific crossing, exhausted in the specific way of small people who have been fully alive for several days straight. Sloan worked across the aisle. Every few minutes, she'd look up and their eyes would meet and something would pass between them that didn't need words. Houston appeared below them as they descended the flat, honest sprawl of the city. The ship channel catching the late afternoon sun, all those intersecting lives doing their small, essential work of being. Down there was the airstrip where this had started. The apartment where Ethan had been disappearing. The cemetery and Memorial Park where Claire waited. Ethan watched the city come up to meet them and thought, I used to be afraid of all of it. The flying, the loving, the possibility that everything could be taken again. He was still afraid, but fear wasn't what it used to be. 3 months after Singapore, a section of the Pearland hangar that had been empty for Ethan's entire 9 months, there was not empty anymore. Desks, computers, 2 simulators, a long table covered in aviation textbooks and sectional charts. On the back wall, a banner that had been printed and hung without his knowledge. Mercer Aviation Academy. What is this? Ethan said. It wasn't quite a question. Your idea, Sloan said. You told me once you wished someone had believed in you when you were young enough for it to change your trajectory. I took notes. She gestured around the room. 18 students registered. Waitlist of 40, ages 14 to 18, from neighborhoods across the Houston metro where opportunity tended to run thin. Why did you name it after me? Because you're going to run it. She looked at him. You fly charter routes 3 days a week. The other 2 you teach kids who've never been on a plane what it looks like to belong to the sky. Ethan walked slowly through the space, touched the edges of it, real and solid. He thought about Danny Reyes at 24, hungry, eager, too young to know what the sky would cost him. He thought about all the Dannys in Houston who'd never get a chance at the sky at all. When do we start? Next Tuesday. The first class arrived on a Tuesday. 18 teenagers. They came in slowly, uncertain, with the particular guardedness of young people who'd learned that care was conditional. Some looked around with wide eyes. Others had their armor on tight. Ethan stood at the front of the room. My name is Captain Ethan Mercer, he said. 6 months ago, I was waxing the floors of this hangar. Some of you may have heard about that. A few of them exchanged looks. They'd heard. I spent 8 years hiding from who I was, running from something that happened and telling myself the only safe thing was to disappear. I was wrong. The room was quiet. 18 pairs of eyes. I'm not here to tell you this is easy. Aviation takes everything you have and asks for more. It means failing over and over until the failure teaches you something, and you find out you've gotten good. He looked at them one by one. But I'm also here to tell you this: where you come from is not the ceiling of where you can go. Your past is not your future, and every single one of you is carrying something inside you that's waiting to take flight. A hand went up in the front row. A girl, maybe 16, 17, with sharp, dark eyes that processed everything. "What made you stop hiding?" she asked. After all that time, what finally changed, Ethan thought about it. "Someone believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself," he said. "And then I had to decide, do I prove them right or do I prove myself wrong? Which did you pick?" "I'm still picking. Every day." He moved closer to the students. "That's the thing nobody tells you. Courage isn't a decision you make once. It's a choice you make every morning the fear comes back. Which it will." He paused. "So who wants to learn how to fly?" Every hand went up. The girl's name was Destiny. She was 17, from the 3rd Ward, had never been on an aircraft of any kind. She was a natural, the kind of natural that announces itself in the first hour. She absorbed everything, stayed late, showed up early, and asked questions Ethan had to think hard to answer. "Do you think I could actually do this?" she asked him one afternoon, 3 months in. "Like, really do it. Commercial aviation, I think you could do anything you commit to. Even from where I come from. Especially from where you come from. People who've had to fight for everything understand what they've earned. That's not a disadvantage. That's a quality." She studied him with those sharp eyes. "Is that why you were mopping floors? Because you needed to earn your way back?" Ethan laughed. Actually laughed. "I was mopping floors because I was afraid." "You're not afraid. That's the difference." 6 months after the academy opened, Ethan found himself on the rooftop of the hangar at dusk. Sloan was supposed to meet him there, a private dinner to mark the academy's first full semester. He stood at the railing watching a plane climb out toward the coast. "You're nervous," she said when she stepped off the elevator. "I always know. You get a particular look. What look like you're calculating a flight path and hoping the math works out." He laughed, reached into his jacket pocket. His fingers found the small box. "I've been thinking about something you said to me in your office, the day you gave me the contract. I said a lot of things that day. You said I should stop letting fear steal the rest of my life." He took her hand. "You were right. About all of it." She looked at his pocket, at the shape visible beneath the fabric. "Ethan." He took out the box, opened it. Inside was a silver ring, simple, clean, and engraved on the band 2 small wings. "I had this made," he said, "because you gave me mine back, and I want to spend whatever time I have left flying next to you." Her hand went to her mouth. "Victoria Sloan Hargrove." He smiled. "Will you marry me?" For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she laughed, pure, unguarded, the sound of something genuinely good happening. "Yes," she said. "Yes, you impossible, wonderful man. Yes." He slid the ring on. It fit as if it had been there before. She pulled him into a kiss. When they finally broke apart, both of them were crying. "Caleb already knows," Ethan said. "What he helped me pick the ring. He's been keeping the secret for 3 weeks. She laughed again, the laugh he loved best now. The unguarded one. "That boy is extraordinary. He's the best thing I ever had anything to do with." The wedding was small. They held it at the hangar, the same hangar where Sloan had mocked a maintenance worker, where Ethan had put down his buffer and walked toward the jet, where everything had started. Noah Caleb walked the rings down the aisle with the concentration of a pilot, executing a precision approach, both rings balanced on a white pillow, his face an expression of intense professional responsibility. Missus Tran was in the front row crying before anyone had said a word. Warren Hargrove walked his daughter down the aisle, healthy enough now present in the way he was learning to be again. Ray Kowalski stood with Ethan. General Dade had flown in from Colorado, and in the back row, barely visible 18 teenagers from the academy in their best clothes sitting up straight. Destiny had organized it. They'd pooled together and bought a framed photograph of the first class, with a handwritten inscription. "Thank you for teaching us that the sky has room for everyone." Ethan didn't see them until after the ceremony. When he did, he couldn't speak for a long moment. "You came," he finally said. "You're our teacher," Destiny said simply. "Of course we came." A year later, Ethan stood on the rooftop in the early morning, watching a jet climb out toward the east. The academy had 40 students now, with a waiting list of 60 more. Destiny was enrolled in flight school on track Unstoppable. Ray had retired officially but came by 3 times a week and refused to stay out of the maintenance bay. Warren Hargrove was in partial remission. He came to the hangar twice a week to tell stories to anyone who would listen. And Danny Reyes had a scholarship in his name now, the Reyes Memorial Fund, paying for underprivileged kids in Houston and San Antonio to pursue aviation. His fiancée had reached out after seeing a feature piece on Ethan in an aviation magazine. She'd cried on the phone, said the fund was exactly what Danny would have wanted. Said his name being spoken in good context meant everything. Ethan visited Claire's grave once a month, told her everything about Caleb, about Sloan, about the academy, about the life he was building from the wreckage of the one they'd shared. He liked to believe she could hear him. On this particular morning, he heard the elevator doors. Noah Caleb ran to the railing, pressed his face against the bars. "Can we see a plane from up here? If we wait long enough." Sloan came to stand beside Ethan, her shoulder against his. Below in the distance, a jet was taxiing toward position. They watched it accelerate, watched the nose lift, watched it climb into the morning, leaving nothing behind but vapor trails and the particular silence that fills the space something beautiful has just moved through. "That's going to be me someday," Caleb announced. "Yeah," Ethan smiled. "What kind of pilot?" "The best kind. Completely certain. Like you." Sloan slipped her hand into his. "He's got the right role model," she said. Ethan watched his son's face wide with dreams, bright with the specific certainty of a child who hasn't learned yet to limit himself, and he remembered being that age once before life had taught him all its most expensive lessons. But life had also taught him the other things, the things underneath the loss, that broken things can be mended, that people who've gone dark can find their way back to light, that the voices of the people we love don't stop when we lose them, they just change frequency. "I love you both," Ethan said quietly. "More than I know how to say." Caleb turned from the railing and crashed into his legs. "We know, Dad." Sloan kissed his cheek. "Always." A plane passed overhead. Another was lining up below. The sky stretched out above them, blue and vast and indifferent and beautiful. The same sky it had always been, full of the same possibility it had always held, waiting with the patience of something that doesn't need to be asked. Twice, Ethan Mercer had spent 8 years hiding from who he was, running from the crash, protecting himself from the risk of loving things that could be taken, disappearing into gray uniforms and quiet floors and the small survivable world he'd built around his grief. That man was gone. In his place stood a pilot, a father, a husband, a teacher, a man who had learned at great cost that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to fly through it, to keep going, to show up, to say yes again even when everything in you is still flinching from the last time yes cost you everything. The sun climbed higher. Houston woke up below them. And somewhere in the hangar where it had all started, a floor buffer stood in the corner, unused and forgotten. Some things you simply don't need anymore. Once you finally remember how to fly,